Hey everyone, welcome back to Forge Core Gaming. I'm your host Phoenix, and today I wanted to make a video on what I believe would be the best fleets for you to invest in at a variety of price points ranging from $100 all the way up to $1,000. So if you're unsure about what ships to buy or where to focus your resources, you're going to want to watch this video. Before we get started, I would like to state that several of these ships can be swapped out with ships of similar price points and functions, and I did make an effort to avoid specialist ships, except on a couple of occasions. I would also like to state that as much as I hate to admit it, I have a bias for or against certain ships in the game. This generally boils down to taste and preference and does not reflect the quality of the ship. I tend to hold the position that there are valid reasons to like or enjoy just about every ship in the game, and if you disagree with one of my picks, then you can shut the I'm just kidding. Actually, if you disagree with one or several of my picks, then I invite you to start a conversation below regarding what you would choose instead. Keep it friendly though, folks. Now without further delay, let's get into it. Now, we're going to get started on the cheaper side of the spectrum, beginning with the $100 fleet. And realistically, you don't even have to spend $100 on this game to thoroughly enjoy it. There are plenty of ways to earn AUEC in-game and buy the ships that you want with credits. In fact, in a lot of ways, this is the path that I would recommend for a lot of players, because buying ships is kind of the primary or only goal of the game right now. Yes, there are some new things to do like contested zones, armor hunting, or general PvP if that's your jam, but ultimately, most of what we do is in the pursuit of better ships. Now that will, of course, change in the coming years, but that means you have time to save up for the ships that you do want. So my best recommendation is to not rush out and spend thousands of dollars before really finding out what you like to do in this game. With that said, at the $100 price point, our focus is to open up as many gameplay loops as possible, albeit some loops are inherently restrictive due to ship size. But the majority of this game can be played with a single-seater spacecraft and can be enjoyed more thoroughly if you have a little bit of cargo space for loading up loot. Now that does narrow down our choices just a little bit to ships like the Cutter from Drake Interplanetary, the Origin 325A, the Reliant Core, and the Crusader Intrepid, and of course, the Avenger Titan. Which is actually my pick for the if you can only afford one ship at less than $100, this is best in slot award. Keep in mind, I'm a bit of an oddball, and 8 times out of 10, I will choose the Crusader Intrepid over the Avenger Titan simply because of the full suite of amenities it offers, and the fact that I really like the way that it looks. With that said, I'm going to stick with the Avenger Titan that costs only $60 and gives a metric ton of options when it comes to gameplay. This stems from the fact that it is a very capable fighter vessel with 1.1 SEU of quantum fuel, a logout bed, and 8 SEU of cargo. Now when I say it's a very capable fighter vessel, this does come with the caveat that it will absolutely be blown out of the sky by a low performing pilot. But if this is your only ship, then you should have plenty of time to get some practice in. Now that leaves us at only $60 out of our available $100, so just to get us closer to our total budget, I'm going to throw in a Mirai Pulse, which is a very compact ground vehicle that conveniently fits into the back of almost every vehicle with a walkable interior, including the Avenger series of ships. Now, let's move on to the $300 fleet, which I think is a very reasonable point for most Star Citizen players to absolutely draw the line with how much money they'd be willing to invest in the game. With that said, if you do decide to draw the line here, there's still plenty for you to enjoy with just a couple of ships. It'll just take some elbow grease to get into some of the bigger ships if you're into that kind of thing. First up, being able to spend more than $100 puts us into the advanced starter ship range, and I think a lot of seasoned citizens would agree that the most logical upgrade step after your basic starter ships is the Drake Cutlass Black. Though you sacrifice a bit on speed and maneuverability, you more than make up for it with flexibility, survivability, maximum DPS, quantum travel range, and the ability to bring on a crewmate if you want to get a friend of yours into the verse alongside you. Priced at $110, the Cutlass Black is one of the better bargains for multi-purpose ships in the verse, especially since it has a respectable 46 SEU capacity, meaning you can likely start engaging in cargo hauling gameplay loops, or you can save up in-game credits to purchase ground vehicles like a rock that would enable you to go mining, which definitely isn't some of the most riveting gameplay available to us, but does offer an alternative route to earn credits. Speaking of earning credits, my second pick for the $300 fleet is a no-brainer for anyone wanting a steady stream of meaningful income that's very low risk and very consistent once you get the hang of it. And that ship, of course, is the Drake Vulture. The Vulture is a very affordable, small-sized salvage ship that basically guarantees you 300,000 to 400,000 credits per hour without the need to fight anyone or even be near potentially hostile players. All you do is go out to an asteroid belt, ping your scan for panels, and start scraping. Realistically, if I were to do a quote-unquote fleet for $200, I would likely just choose the Vulture, as you can earn every single ship in the game in a pretty low-skill gameplay loop. All you have to do is put in the hours. Now, the Vulture is priced at $175 at this time, so that means our total is at $285, meaning that we only have about $15 left to spend, so either you can buy some skins for your ship, or you can buy a PTV, which, I'll be honest, I've never used, but if you want to do bunker runs and completely skip the part where you have to take down enemy turrets, the PTV can fit in either the Vulture or the Cuddy Black, and can be used to shuttle you from a safe distance on ground, completely negating enemy bunker defenses. Just keep in mind, you will still have to deal with enemy ground forces once you get there. One quick disclaimer, ground vehicles are really cheap in game. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, almost all ground vehicles can be bought in game for less than 100,000 AUEC, which is 1 to 2 low-level bounties in Pyro. So if you just want to save the $15, just do that. You can buy it in game with little to no effort. Moving on, next we have what I like to call the Gateway Fleet at $500. At this point, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and are probably starting to hide your bank statements from your significant other. If you're new to this tier spending on a video game though, don't worry, lots of us have been here for like a while, and we have cookies. Anyways, ship number 1 in my $500 fleet is one that, up until a couple of weeks ago, I hadn't really given the time of day. But since I did a review on it, which I will shamelessly plug as being linked in the description, this has become my pound for pound best bang for your buck ship in this game. It has, dare I say it, just about everything. It has a small cargo area with 12 SCU capacity, logout beds, internal storage, and one of the best X-Factor additions you can imagine, Tier 3 medical beds. If you're new to the game, medical beds let you not only heal Category 3 injuries, but they also let you set your spawn point inside of your ship, which is a hugely valuable bonus if you're doing FPS style gameplay and don't want to have to go back to a station to heal, or are prone to the occasional oopsie when fighting enemies on foot. Medical beds save you time, which in this game is more valuable than just about anything else. My only drawback to this variant of the Cutlass series of ships is that the co-pilot doesn't have access to any guns, only a spotlight, which is strangely positioned on top of the ship rather than on the bottom. Now the Cuddy Red comes in at only $135, so we still have quite a bit of spending money here. And that's a good thing, because my next pick is my first, what I would term, pricey ship. The Constellation Taurus comes in at $200, and brings with it 4 size 5 pilot-controlled guns, which ranks it among the best in pilot-controlled DPS, especially since the Corsair rebalance that happened a few months ago. It also has 174 SCU of cargo, which is massive, meaning you can not only take on several cargo hauling contracts at once, but you can also harvest large loads of loot from high-tier bounties that you take down. Now, I haven't opened up ERT since 4.0 dropped, so I'm not familiar with the loot table and drop rates of valuable contraband. But if you happen to get lucky and score a large haul of contraband from bounty targets, you stand to make a lot of credits if you can successfully haul everything away and sell it. In previous patches, this was the way to get money for new ships. The Taurus also has a handy large tractor beam on the bottom turret, so it can make your cargo liberation that much easier. That still leaves us with about $165 left to burn, which is $10 shy of a Vulture, but this next ship opens up another gameplay loop that, though it isn't quite as profitable as salvaging, can still be quite profitable considering its relatively low risk. And that ship is the Misk Prospector. At $155, instead of searching the asteroid belt for panels to salvage, you can now search for asteroids to mine, which, if you're not a big fan of confrontation in combat, is another decent way of making money and will become hugely more valuable when crafting and base building comes out. So even if you're not fond of industrial style gameplay, this may still be a ship you want to hang on to simply for the sake of helping your org out with supplies. Just a quick disclaimer, the Prospector for me is a bit of a flex pick, and if you absolutely do not want to engage in industrial gameplay, then my secondary pick would be a Gladius and an Ursa Medevac, aka a Nursa. The Nursa being an extreme value boost to the Constellation Taurus, giving it the same medical capabilities as the Cutlass Red when parked in the cargo bay. And the Gladius being one of the best light fighters in the game, opening up more combat options for you to enjoy if you feel like flying around in something smaller, faster, and purpose-built. Right, now let's move on to the $700 fleet, which has some overlap with some of the less expensive ones. Starting off again with the Cutlass Red and Vulture for the aforementioned reasons, bringing our total right out of the gate to $310. Next we have a different variant of the Constellation series, the Andromeda, which is a notable upgrade to the Taurus in the category of combat. The Andromeda brings, in addition to the 4 size 5s controlled by the pilot, 2 separate manned gun turrets armed with dual size 3s and a crazy amount of missiles for a medium ship, plus a bonus of roughly 50k hull HP. The only thing it sacrifices is roughly 80 SCU of cargo space, but the 96 SCU of cargo space it still retains is plenty for most cases. And that brings our total so far to $550, meaning we have $150 to use, so I'd have to recommend again the Nursa and the Gladius, bringing our fleet total to an even $700. Up next we have our $900 fleet, which again has some overlap, and that's due to the fact that we're trying to build fleets that unlock as many gameplay loops as possible. But again, we start off with the Cutlass Red, the Vulture, the Nursa, and the Mirai Pulse, bringing our total to $400, which means we can welcome in our first new addition, the Mirai Guardian, which will likely be one of my most controversial picks, as it really isn't what I call necessary. It's just better at combat than the other ships in this fleet. At $250, I think it's important to bear in mind that the price of a ship does not mean it's better than other fighters. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's worse than other fighters. This one made its way in because of the rule of cool, and I just love this ship, and I think a lot of people do as well. Next, I have a flex pick, and by all rights, we could just keep the Constellation Andromeda here, as we have $250 to spend, and the Andromeda fits right in, filling the need for a cargo ship. With that said, for the sake of bringing a ship that I personally prefer over the Constellation series of ships, I'm going to slot in here the Starlancer Max. On that note, you could also slot the Corsair in here for the same price. This one really boils down to preference and personal taste, and of the three, the Starlancer Max objectively performs the worst, except for the fact that it has the highest cargo capacity at 224 SCU and does not lose cargo capacity if you load a vehicle into it. But with the ship I chose, our total comes out to exactly $900, and with this fleet, you have access to most gameplay loops. Another flex pick here would be to sub in the F7C Mark II for the Guardian and then subbing in the Prospector for the Nursa and Pulse. You would still come out to $900 and have access to an additional gameplay loop in the case that the mining bug bites you. Finally, we get to our $1,000 fleet, which also grants your account concierge access, the benefits of which I've yet to actually see, but you do get some in-game items at the start of each wipe, which may or not be valuable to you, in addition to concierge support should you run into an issue in-game. Again, I haven't seen the benefit of that, but other players may have. Take from that what you will. Now, some might see the $1,000 price point as an opportunity to get a capital ship, but realistically, I wouldn't recommend it. As someone who owns a Polaris, I can tell you from firsthand experience, the idea of using it is a lot more interesting than actually doing so. And in my experience, this game is much more enjoyable if you're taking your ship to the limits of its capabilities rather than using an overpowered ship that doesn't really shine unless it's heavily crewed. Particularly because it's kind of difficult to organize a full crew in the current state of the game, but that's a topic for another video. With that said, following the theme of my previous fleets, we're going to have a lot of overlap here. Again, the Cutlass Red is a solid pick here, as well as something like the Starlancer Max. The Guardian makes its way into the fleet, and the Vulture. My recommendations for those haven't changed. What has changed is the inclusion of something like the F7C Mark II Ghost, which is a very purpose-built combat ship, and it's currently part of the meta when it comes to PvP, particularly if you attach the nose turrets to it, which is a not insignificant bump to its DPS. Of course, at $1,000, the possible permutations of what your best in slot ships are countless. These are just my picks, and they come from several places, including my personal experiences, my particularities, my preferences, and honestly, what I like to look at. But most of these ships are in my fleet and are, for the most part, permanent staples just because I enjoy using them. So if you have different reasons to own different ships, there's no shame in that. In fact, it's great that there are so many options for exactly how we want to play the game, even though the game and its features aren't quite complete as of right now. On that note, one of the biggest lessons I've learned about Star Citizen to date is this: don't rush out and buy ships just for the sake of owning them. I've done that with a couple of ships and regretted it in the long term. Perfect example, my Polaris. Is it cool to own a capital ship? Maybe, but if I'm honest, the novelty of it wore off after about a week, and I have on more than one occasion considered melting it. The only reason I haven't is because there's nothing else I really need or want. And I could honestly say the same thing if I had spent half as much money or even less as I have to this point, and take from that what you will. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. If you've made it up to this point, I'd ask that you leave me a like and subscribe. We're still a relatively new channel and really appreciate any feedback and support you may have. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.